Everyone expected the judge to say one thing. He said something else. The single mother stood quietly in the courtroom, holding herself together in a way only someone under constant pressure learns to do. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't defensive. Her posture said everything before she even spoke. Tired but composed. Overwhelmed but trying not to show it. In front of her was a fine that had grown from a missed payment, something that might look small on paper, but in her life, it had become overwhelming. She didn't argue. She didn't blame anyone. She didn't raise her voice or try to gain sympathy. Instead, she spoke calmly, carefully choosing her words, as if she had rehearsed them in her head many times. Not because she wanted to manipulate the outcome, but because she wanted to be understood. She explained how the missed payment happened during a stretch when everything seemed to fall apart at once. A sick child, missed workdays, reduced income, bills stacking up faster than she could manage. She talked about trying to hold her life together with limited resources and even less margin for error. One mistake didn't stay small. It snowballed. Late fees were added. Notices arrived. Stress grew. What started as a manageable responsibility slowly turned into a situation she couldn't control anymore. Her voice didn't crack, but the weight behind it was clear. This wasn't someone avoiding responsibility. This was someone overwhelmed by it. Being a single mother meant every decision carried extra weight. There was no one else to split the burden with. No backup when something went wrong. If she missed work, there was no second income to soften the impact. If a bill went unpaid, it wasn't a budgeting failure. It was a reality of choosing between necessities. She explained that she had tried to fix the situation. She had planned to catch up. She had every intention of paying what she owed. But life had a way of interrupting plans, especially when you're already stretched thin. The courtroom listened, not because she demanded attention, but because her story felt familiar in a way that statistics never do. Many people in the room understood that kind of pressure. The quiet struggle of trying to do everything right while knowing one unexpected problem can throw everything off balance. She stood there not asking for special treatment. She wasn't asking for the rules to be ignored. She simply wanted the situation to be seen for what it was. A human moment, not just a violation. As she finished explaining, the courtroom slowly grew quiet. Not awkwardly quiet. Thoughtfully quiet. Papers stopped rustling. Chairs stopped shifting. The energy in the room changed. The case was no longer just a mispayment. It was about responsibility, under pressure. About how easily circumstances can spiral beyond control. Judge Frank Caprio sat at the bench, reviewing the case file in front of him. He didn't interrupt her explanation. He didn't rush her. He listened. Carefully. Fully. The way people hope to be listened to when they finally speak honestly. He looked down at the paperwork, scanning dates, amounts, notes. To an outsider, it might have seemed routine. But there was intention behind the review. This wasn't about finding a reason to punish. It was about understanding context. The single mother waited quietly as he reviewed the case. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was slow and deliberate. She wasn't nervous about speaking anymore. She had said what she needed to say. Now, she was waiting to see whether it mattered. The silence stretched just long enough to feel heavy. In that silence lived a question that wasn't spoken out loud. Would the system see her as a case number or as a person? Would this moment end with more pressure added to an already heavy life, or with understanding? Judge Caprio continued reviewing the file. Years of experience showed in his calm demeanor. He had seen countless cases like this, but no two stories were ever the same. The law provided structure, but discretion existed for moments like these. Moments where fairness required more than a strict reading of the rules. The courtroom remained still as everyone waited for him to look up. This wasn't just about a fine. It was about balance. About how justice responds to people doing their best under difficult circumstances. The single mother stood there, not knowing what the decision would be, but knowing she had been honest. Knowing she had taken responsibility. Knowing she had shown up. And as Judge Frank Caprio prepared to speak, the tension in the room wasn't fear. It was hope. Quiet, careful hope that justice might listen before it judged. Judge Frank Caprio finally looked up from the papers in front of him. It wasn't a sudden movement. It was calm, deliberate, and unhurried. The kind of moment that instantly pulls attention without demanding it. The The courtroom, already quiet, seemed to grow even stiller. Everyone understood that this was the turning point. Whatever he said next would matter. His expression wasn't harsh. It wasn't sympathetic either. It was balanced, focused, the look of someone who had weighed both the law and the life standing in front of him. When he spoke, his voice was steady and controlled. "The law gives me discretion," he said, "and discretion exists to be fair." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were intentional. He wasn't rejecting the law. He wasn't bending it out of emotion. He was explaining its purpose. Discretion, as he described it, was not a loophole. It was a responsibility. A tool meant to be used carefully, especially in moments where strict punishment would create more harm than good. He acknowledged the missed payment. He acknowledged that rules exist for a reason. But he also acknowledged the reality behind the violation. Then came the decision. The fine was dismissed. There was no build-up, no pause meant to create suspense. Just a clear, calm conclusion. The kind that doesn't seek attention because it doesn't need it. For a second, the single mother standing before him didn't move. The words took a moment to register. She had prepared herself for penalties, for payment plans, for more pressure. Relief wasn't what she expected. Her shoulders slowly relaxed, as if she had been holding her breath without realizing it. The tension in her posture softened. Her hands, clenched moments ago, loosened at her sides. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was quieter than that, more personal. This wasn't about escaping responsibility. It was about being seen. Judge Caprio explained briefly that rules matter, but they are not meant to ignore context. Fairness, he emphasized, is not blind to circumstance. Understanding the person behind the violation is part of delivering real justice. The courtroom didn't react the way people often expect in stories like this. There was no applause, no gasps, no visible celebration. Instead, the room reflected. People sat still, absorbing what had just happened. Some nodded subtly. Others looked thoughtful. It wasn't entertainment. It was a lesson. A reminder that authority doesn't lose strength when it chooses compassion. It gains credibility. Judge Caprio didn't linger on the moment. He didn't make it about himself. He didn't frame it as a moral victory. He simply moved on, ready for the next case. For him, this was not an exception. It was the job done correctly. But the impact stayed. For the single mother, that decision meant more than financial relief. It meant dignity. It meant that her honesty had mattered. That showing up, taking responsibility, and telling the truth still counted for something in a system many people fear. For the people watching, it shifted perspective. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't intimidating. It didn't need to prove itself. It listened first. It considered context. It responded with balance. Real justice doesn't shout. It doesn't embarrass people. It doesn't rush to punish. It listens before it acts. The case ended quietly. Another name was called. The day continued, but the lesson lingered in the room long after the moment passed. Sometimes fairness means enforcing consequences. Sometimes it means restraint. And sometimes it means understanding that life is already demanding enough. Judge Caprio's decision didn't weaken the law. It demonstrated its purpose. That justice is not just about what is written, but about how it is applied. And in that courtroom, for a brief but meaningful moment, everyone was reminded that when justice listens, it earns trust.